Maria Santos never imagined that taking a summer job at Blackwater Ranch would change her life forever. At 24, she was just trying to save money for nursing school while living in the small town of Cedar Ridge, Montana. The ranch job seemed perfect. Decent pay, simple work, and plenty of fresh air away from her cramped apartment above the local diner. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rolling hills as Maria pulled her beat-up Honda into the gravel driveway of the sprawling ranch. She had met the owner, Tom Blackwater, just once during her brief interview 3 days earlier. He was a weathered man in his 60s who spoke in short sentences and seemed more interested in her willingness to work hard than her lack of ranch experience. "Just need someone to keep the main house clean and help with the horses when needed," he had said, barely looking up from the paperwork on his desk. "Pay is $300 a week, plus meals. You start Monday." Now, standing on the wraparound porch of the main house, Maria felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The ranch was beautiful, with white fencing stretching as far as she could see and mountains rising majestically in the distance. She knocked on the heavy wooden door, adjusting the strap of her worn backpack. Tom opened the door, coffee mug in hand, and nodded toward the interior. "Come on in. I'll show you around before I head into town." The house was surprisingly modern inside, with hardwood floors and large windows that flooded the rooms with natural light. As they walked through the kitchen, living room, and 3 bedrooms, Tom explained her duties with the same matter-of-fact tone he had used during the interview. "Main thing is keeping everything tidy. I'm not home much during the week, so it's mostly dusting, vacuuming, changing sheets. The horses get fed twice a day, morning and evening. There are only 6 of them now." He paused at the back door, looking out toward the barn. "One more thing. My nephew Jake is staying in the guest cabin for a while. He just got back from overseas. Military. He keeps to himself mostly, but you might see him around." Maria nodded, following his gaze toward a small log cabin about 100 yards from the main house. Smoke was rising from its chimney, and she could see a figure moving around outside, though she couldn't make out any details from this distance. "Jake's been through a lot," Tom continued, his voice dropping slightly. "He's adjusting to being back home. Best to just let him be unless he needs something." There was something in Tom's tone that made Maria curious, but she simply nodded again. After Tom left for town, Maria spent the morning familiarizing herself with the house and her duties. The work was straightforward, and she found herself enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. Around noon, she decided to walk down to the barn to meet the horses and get a feel for that part of her responsibilities. The barn was well maintained, with 6 stalls housing beautiful horses of various breeds. Maria had limited experience with horses, but she had always loved animals and felt comfortable around them. She was reading the feeding instructions posted on the wall when she heard footsteps behind her. "You must be the new help." The voice was deep and slightly rough, making her turn around quickly. The man standing in the barn entrance was tall and lean, with short dark hair and intense brown eyes. He wore faded jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, and there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested coiled strength and alertness. "I'm Maria," she said, extending her hand with a friendly smile. "You must be Jake." He looked at her outstretched hand for a moment before shaking it briefly. His grip was firm but not crushing, and she noticed several small scars on his knuckles. "Jake Morrison," he said simply, then looked around the barn. "Tom show you how to feed them?" "He gave me the basic instructions. I was just reading through them." Maria gestured toward the paper on the wall, trying to keep the conversation light despite Jake's somewhat intimidating presence. Jake walked over and glanced at the instructions, then looked back at her with what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Tom's instructions are fine, but these horses have their own personalities. Duchess there," he pointed to a beautiful chestnut mare. "She's particular about her hay. Won't eat it if it's not fresh. And Storm," he indicated a large black stallion. "He gets aggressive if you don't approach his stall from the left side." Maria found herself genuinely interested in what he was telling her, and Jake seemed to relax slightly as he talked about the horses. For the next 20 minutes, he walked her through each horse's quirks and preferences, showing a knowledge and gentle touch that surprised her given his stern appearance. "You know a lot about horses," Maria commented as they finished the tour. "Grew up on a ranch in Wyoming," Jake replied, his expression becoming more guarded again. "Been a while since I've been around them, though." There was something in his tone that suggested the conversation was over, and Maria sensed it was time to give him space. "Well, thank you for the advice. I really appreciate it," she said, genuinely grateful for his help. Jake nodded and turned to leave, but paused at the barn entrance. "Maria," he said, not turning back to look at her, "be careful around here at night. This area is more isolated than it looks, and there are things in these mountains that most people don't know about." Before Maria could ask what he meant, Jake had walked away, heading back toward his cabin with the same measured stride she had noticed earlier. Standing alone in the barn with the horses, Maria felt a chill run down her spine despite the warm afternoon sun streaming through the open doors. The first week at Blackwater Ranch passed quietly, with Maria settling into a comfortable routine. She discovered that she genuinely enjoyed the work, finding peace in the simple tasks of maintaining the house and caring for the horses. Tom remained, mostly absent, traveling to various cattle auctions and business meetings in surrounding towns, which left Maria largely on her own with the animals and the stunning Montana landscape. Jake proved to be an enigma. Some days she wouldn't see him at all, though she'd notice lights in his cabin late into the night and smoke rising from his chimney before dawn. Other days, she'd find him already at the barn when she arrived for morning feeding, quietly working, with the horses or repairing equipment. He never said much, but Maria began to appreciate his presence. There was something reassuring about having him around, even if she couldn't quite put her finger on why. On Thursday evening of her second week, Maria was finishing up her cleaning in the main house when she heard a vehicle approaching. Through the kitchen window, she watched a black pickup truck pull up to the front of the house. Two men got out, both wearing expensive-looking suits that seemed out of place in the rural setting. Something about them made her instinctively uneasy. The knock on the front door was loud and assertive. Maria dried her hands on a dish towel and went to answer it, leaving the chain lock engaged as she opened the door part way. "Good evening, miss," said the taller of the two men. He was middle-aged with graying hair and cold blue eyes. "We're looking for Tom Blackwater. Is he available?" "He's not here right now," Maria replied, studying both men carefully. "Can I take a message?" The second man, younger with a thick neck and closely cropped hair, stepped forward slightly. "When do you expect him back?" Something in his tone made Maria's skin crawl. "I'm not sure. He travels a lot for business. You could try calling him directly." She began to close the door, but the older man placed his hand against it. "We'd prefer to wait," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mind if we come in?" "Actually, I do mind," Maria said firmly, surprised by her own boldness. "If you'd like to leave your names and a number where Tom can reach you, I'll make sure he gets the message." The two men exchanged a look that made Maria's heart race. The older man's fake smile disappeared completely. "Listen, sweetheart, we're not asking for much here. Just want to have a friendly conversation with Tom about some business matters, and—" "I told you he's not here," Maria replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Now please leave." She managed to close the door and immediately turned the deadbolt, her hands shaking slightly. Through the window, she watched the men return to their truck, but instead of leaving, they sat there talking in low voices. After about 10 minutes, they drove away, but something told Maria this wasn't the end of it. The next morning, Maria was surprised to find Jake waiting for her at the barn earlier than usual. He was leaning against Duchess's stall, but his posture was tense, alert in a way she hadn't seen before. "Had some visitors last night," he said without preamble. "How did you know?" Maria asked, though she suspected Jake had been watching the house from his cabin. "I make it my business to know what's happening around here," Jake replied, his eyes scanning the area around them. "Tell me exactly what happened." Maria described the encounter with the two men, noting how Jake's expression grew increasingly grim as she talked. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, seeming to process the information. "These men," Jake said finally. Did they mention any names? Any specific business they had with Tom? No, they were very vague about everything, but Jake, there was something off about them. The way they acted, the way they looked at me. It wasn't normal. Jake nodded slowly. Your instincts were right. Those weren't businessmen. He moved away from the stall and walked to the barn entrance, scanning the horizon with practiced eyes. Maria, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Has Tom ever mentioned anything unusual about his business? Anyone he might owe money to or any problems he's been having? Maria shook her head. He barely talks to me at all. Just gives me my duties and leaves. Why? Do you think those men were dangerous? I think, Jake said carefully, that you might want to consider finding a different job. He turned to face her directly, and for the first time since they'd met, his expression was completely serious. I can't explain everything right now, but Tom's gotten himself mixed up in something bad. Those men who came here last night, they're not going to give up just because Tom wasn't home. Fear crept up Maria's spine. What kind of trouble are you talking about? Jake was quiet for a long moment, clearly debating how much to tell her. Let's just say that Tom's recent business trips haven't all been about cattle auctions. He's been moving things for people who don't like to be disappointed. What kind of things? The kind of things that get people killed when they go missing, Jake said bluntly. Maria felt the blood drain from her face. She had taken this job to save money for nursing school, not to get caught up in some kind of criminal activity. I should quit. I should leave right now. Maybe, Jake agreed. But those men saw you last night. They know you work here. Leaving might not be enough to keep you safe now. The weight of his words settled over Maria like a heavy blanket. She looked around the peaceful barn, at the horses contentedly munching their hay, and realized that everything she had thought she knew about this place was wrong. What do you think I should do? She asked quietly. Jake studied her face for a moment, seeming to weigh his options. For now, keep doing your job like nothing's changed, but stay alert, and if you see anything suspicious, any vehicles you don't recognize, anyone hanging around who doesn't belong, you come find me immediately. Day or night doesn't matter. Why are you helping me? Maria asked. You barely know me. Something shifted in Jake's expression, a momentary softening that gave her a glimpse of the man behind the guarded exterior. Because, he said simply, you don't deserve to get hurt because of Tom's mistakes. As they stood there in the barn, with sunlight streaming through the wooden slats and dust motes dancing in the air, Maria realized that her simple summer job had become something else entirely. She was no longer just a housekeeper on a quiet ranch. She was a witness to something dangerous, and whether she liked it or not, she was now part of whatever trouble Tom Blackwater had brought to his property. Over the next few days, Maria found herself constantly looking over her shoulder and jumping at every unexpected sound. Jake had become more visible around the ranch, often appearing near the main house when she arrived in the morning, or lingering by the barn when she finished her evening duties. She began to understand that he was watching over her, though he never said so directly. On Wednesday evening, Tom finally returned from his latest trip. Maria heard his truck pull up around sunset and watched from the kitchen window as he unloaded several large duffel bags from the back. His movements were quick and nervous, very different from his usual unhurried manner. When he entered the house, his face was drawn, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. Maria, he said, setting down his bags heavily. Everything been quiet while I was gone? She hesitated, remembering Jake's advice to act normal. Mostly, yes. A couple of men stopped by asking for you on Thursday. I told them you weren't here and suggested they call you directly. Tom's face went pale. What did they look like? Maria described the two visitors, watching as Tom's expression grew increasingly worried. When she finished, he ran his hands through his gray hair and cursed under his breath. Did they give you their names? He asked urgently. No, they wouldn't say who they were. They wanted to wait for you, but I told them they couldn't come in. Maria tried to keep her voice casual, though her heart was racing. Is everything okay? Tom, everything's fine. he said quickly, though his behavior suggested otherwise. If anyone else comes around asking for me, you don't know anything, understand? Don't know when I'll be back, don't know where I went, don't know nothing. That night, Maria had trouble sleeping. Around 2 in the morning, she was awakened by the sound of vehicles approaching the house. Carefully, she crept to her bedroom window and peered through the curtains. 3 dark SUVs had pulled up in front of the house, and several men were getting out. Even in the dim light from the porch, she could see they were armed. Her hands shaking, Maria grabbed her phone and quickly sent a text message to Jake's number, which he had given her earlier that week. Armed men at house now. Within seconds, her phone buzzed with his reply. Stay hidden. Do not come outside. Through her window, Maria watched as the men surrounded the house. She could hear Tom's voice, though she couldn't make out his words. The conversation seemed tense, with several men talking at once. After about 20 minutes, she saw Tom emerge from the house carrying 2 of the duffel bags he had brought back with him. The men took the bags and loaded them into one of the SUVs. Just as Maria thought the situation might be resolving peacefully, she heard raised voices and what sounded like a struggle. Her heart pounded as she watched Tom being forced toward one of the vehicles. This wasn't a business meeting. This was a kidnapping. Without thinking, Maria grabbed her phone and started to dial 911. But before she could press send, a hand clamped over her mouth and an arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her away from the window. She started to scream, but the hand pressed tighter against her mouth. It's me, Jake's voice whispered urgently in her ear. Don't make a sound. He had somehow gotten into her room without her hearing him, and now he was pulling her down to the floor beside the bed. Through the window, they could hear car doors slamming and engines starting up. How did you get in here? Maria whispered when Jake removed his hand from her mouth. Back door was unlocked, he said quietly, his attention focused on the sounds outside. I've been watching from the trees since I got your text. They waited in tense silence until the sound of the vehicles faded into the distance. Only then did Jake move away from the window and help Maria to her feet. We need to get you out of here, he said. Now. What about Tom? We have to call the police. Jake shook his head grimly. The police can't help Tom now, and if we call them, it's going to raise questions you don't want to answer. Those men took what they came for, but they know you were here. They know you saw them. Maria felt panic rising in her chest. What are you saying? I'm saying that your life just became a lot more complicated, Jake replied, moving to her dresser and pulling out clothes. Pack light and fast, we're leaving in 5 minutes. I'm not going anywhere with you until you tell me what's really going on here, Maria said, though even as she spoke, she was grabbing items from her dresser and shoving them into her backpack. Jake paused in his efficient movements around her room. Tom's been smuggling drugs across the Canadian border for a cartel based out of Seattle. Those men were his business partners, and something went wrong with the last shipment. They came to collect what he owed them. How do you know all this? Because, Jake said, meeting her eyes directly for the first time since he'd entered her. I've been investigating this operation for the past 6 months. I'm not really Tom's nephew, and I'm not here by coincidence. Maria stared at him, processing this revelation. You're a cop? Not exactly. Jake finished checking the window and turned back to her. I work for an agency that handles situations like this. Tom's operation has been on our radar for a while, but we needed evidence. I was placed here to gather intelligence. So you've been using me, Maria said, feeling betrayed and angry despite the danger they were in. No, Jake said firmly. I've been trying to protect you. My assignment was to monitor Tom's activities, not to babysit his housekeeper. But when you showed up, everything got more complicated. Maria shouldered her backpack, her mind reeling. What happens now? Now we disappear until I can figure out how to keep you alive, Jake said, checking his weapon before leading her toward the door. Those men won't stop looking for you, Maria. You're a witness to a federal crime, and they can't afford to let you talk. As they crept through the dark house toward the back door, Maria realized that her simple summer job had just transformed into a fight for her life. The quiet ranch that had seemed like such a peaceful refuge was now a crime scene. and the mysterious veteran who had warned her to be careful was apparently the only thing standing between her and people who wanted her dead. "Where are we going?" she whispered as they slipped out into the night. "Somewhere they won't think to look," Jake replied. "And then I'm going to teach you how to survive what's coming next." Jake led Maria through the darkness away from the ranch house, moving with the silent precision of someone trained in covert operations. They hiked for nearly an hour through rough terrain, following what seemed like invisible paths through the Montana wilderness. Maria's legs burned from the unfamiliar exertion, but she pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that her life depended on keeping up. Finally, Jake stopped at what appeared to be an abandoned mining shack tucked into a grove of pine trees. The structure was weathered and looked like it hadn't been used in decades, but when Jake produced a key and unlocked the door, Maria realized this was no random shelter. Inside, the shack was equipped with basic supplies: canned food, water, sleeping bags, and what looked like surveillance equipment. A generator hummed quietly in the corner, powering a radio and several electronic devices Maria didn't recognize. "This is your safe house?" she asked, setting down her backpack and looking around the cramped space. "One of them," Jake replied, immediately moving to the radio equipment. "I need to contact my handler and report what happened tonight." As Jake worked with the radio, speaking in codes and abbreviations that Maria couldn't understand, she began to process the full reality of her situation. Just hours ago, she had been worried about getting enough sleep before her morning shift. Now she was hiding in an abandoned mining shack with a federal agent, running from drug dealers who wanted her dead. "How long do we have to stay here?" she asked when Jake finished his radio communication. "At least until morning. My people need time to assess the situation and figure out our next move." Jake turned to face her, and in the dim light from the generator-powered lamp, she could see the strain in his features. "I need to be honest with you about something, Maria. This situation is worse than I initially thought." Maria felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "The operation Tom was involved in is bigger than just drug smuggling. These people have connections throughout law enforcement in 3 states. There are cops, judges, and federal agents on their payroll. That means I can't trust normal channels to keep you safe." "Are you saying we can't trust anyone?" "I'm saying we can only trust my immediate team, and even then we have to be careful." Jake sat down on one of the supply crates, suddenly looking very tired. "The agency I work for specializes in situations like this, operations that have become too compromised for normal law enforcement to handle." Maria sank down onto her sleeping bag, feeling overwhelmed. "I just wanted to make money for nursing school. How did my life become this complicated?" "Wrong place, wrong time," Jake said simply. "But you're alive, and we're going to keep it that way." Over the next few hours, Jake began to explain more about the situation they were facing. The cartel operation that Tom had been working with was sophisticated and well-connected, moving millions of dollars worth of drugs across the Canadian border every month. Tom's ranch had been a perfect way station, remote, with legitimate reasons for vehicles coming and going, and an owner who was desperate enough for money to ignore questions about his new business partners. "Tom's farm has been failing for years," Jake explained. "His wife left him 2 years ago and took half of everything in the divorce. He was facing bankruptcy when these people approached him with what seemed like an easy solution to his problems, so he agreed to let them use his property. More than that, he became actively involved in moving the product. That's what those duffel bags were about. Each successful transport earned him a cut of the profits." Maria shook her head. "Then, what went wrong?" Jake's expression darkened. 3 weeks ago, Tom got greedy. He skimmed product from one of the shipments, planning to sell it independently. The cartel figured it out almost immediately. "And that's when they came to collect?" "That's when they came to send a message," Jake corrected. "Tom wasn't just in debt to them, he had betrayed them. In their world, that's a death sentence." The weight of this information settled over Maria like a heavy blanket. She realized that she had been living and working at the center of a criminal operation without having any idea of the danger she was in. "How long have you been watching the ranch?" she asked. 6 months. I was placed there as Tom's nephew to gather evidence and identify all the players in the operation. My mission was supposed to last another 2 months, giving us time to build a case that could take down the entire network. And now? Now the operation has collapsed. Tom is probably dead, and you're a witness who can identify the people responsible. Jake looked directly at her. My mission parameters have changed. My new priority is keeping you alive long enough to testify. The reality of her situation hit Maria like a physical blow. You mean I'm going to have to testify against these people? In court? If we can build a case, yes. Your testimony about what you saw tonight, combined with the evidence I've already gathered, could be enough to bring down a significant portion of their operation. Maria felt tears forming in her eyes. I can't do this, Jake. I'm not brave enough for this kind of thing. I'm just a small-town girl who wanted to be a nurse. Jake moved closer to her, his voice becoming gentler. Maria, you're braver than you realize. You stood up to those men when they came to the door. You trusted your instincts when something felt wrong. And tonight, when everything went bad, you didn't panic. You did exactly what you needed to do to stay alive. But I'm scared. Good, Jake said firmly. Being scared will keep you sharp and help you make good decisions. Fear isn't your enemy. Right now, complacency is. As dawn began to break through the small window of the mining shack, Jake started preparing for their next move. He checked and rechecked his weapons, studied maps of the surrounding area, and made several more radio contacts with his team. What's the plan? Maria asked, watching his methodical preparations. We're going to move to a more secure location where my team can debrief you properly and start building our case. But first, I need to teach you some basic survival skills, because there's a good chance we're going to encounter resistance along the way. What kind of resistance? Jake looked up from the map he was studying. The kind where people try to kill us, he said matter-of-factly. These people have resources, Maria. They have money, weapons, and people throughout the region who are loyal to them. They're not going to let a witness walk away from what you saw last night. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. How many people are we talking about? Potentially dozens. Maybe more. Jake folded the map and looked directly at her. That's why I need you to understand something very clearly. From this moment forward, your old life is over. You can't go home. You can't contact your friends or family, and you can't assume that anywhere is truly safe. The only way you survive this is if you trust me completely and follow my instructions without question. Looking into Jake's serious, brown eyes, Maria realized that she was about to face the most difficult test of her life. The next few days would determine whether she lived to see her dreams of nursing school come true, or whether she became another casualty in a war between criminals that she had never wanted to be part of. The next morning brought a harsh awakening to the reality of Maria's new life. Jake woke her before dawn and immediately began what he called essential training. Within the first hour, she learned how to properly hold and fire a handgun, how to identify potential escape routes in any building or area, and how to recognize the signs that they were being followed or watched. This isn't a movie, Maria, Jake said as he adjusted her grip on the pistol for the 10th time. In real situations, you won't have time to think about your stance or your breathing. You need these movements to become automatic. The morning. Training session revealed just how unprepared Maria was for the world she had been thrust into. Her hands shook every time she pulled the trigger, and she flinched at the sound of gunfire despite wearing ear protection. Jake remained patient but firm, correcting her technique and pushing her to overcome her natural fear of the weapon. I don't think I can do this, Maria said after missing the target completely for the 5th consecutive shot. You don't have a choice, Jake replied bluntly. The people hunting us aren't going to give you a timeout because you're scared. Either you learn to defend yourself or you become a victim. Around noon, Jake's radio crackled with an urgent message. Maria couldn't understand the coded language, but she could tell from Jake's expression that the news wasn't good. After a brief conversation, he switched off the radio and began packing their supplies with quick, efficient movements. What's wrong? Maria asked, sensing the sudden tension in his demeanor. My team intercepted communications indicating that the cartel has put a bounty on both of us. $50,000 for you, dead or alive. $100,000 for me. Jake shouldered his backpack and checked his weapons. They're mobilizing resources from across the region. We need to move now. They left the mining shack and began hiking deeper into the Montana wilderness. Jake set a punishing pace, leading them along trails that seemed to exist only in his memory. After several hours of difficult hiking, they reached a rocky outcropping that provided a clear view of the valley below. There, Jake said, pointing to a convoy of black SUVs moving along the highway in the distance. They're conducting a grid search of the area. They'll find the shack within hours. Maria watched the vehicles with growing dread. The reality that dozens of armed men were actively hunting for her felt surreal, like something from a nightmare rather than her actual life. How many people are looking for us? She asked. Based on the intelligence my team gathered, probably 30 to 40 active searchers in this immediate area, with more being brought in from Seattle and Vancouver. Jake studied the terrain ahead of them through binoculars. But we have advantages. They don't. Like what? I know this country, and I've been trained for situations like this. Plus, they're used to operating in urban environments where they can rely on technology and manpower. Out here, those advantages are reduced. As they continued hiking, Jake began to share more details about his background and training. He had served 3 tours in Afghanistan as part of a special operations unit, specializing in deep reconnaissance and counterinsurgency operations. After leaving the military, he had been recruited by a classified federal agency that handled cases too sensitive or too compromised for traditional law enforcement. The agency I work for doesn't officially exist, he explained as they navigated a particularly steep section of trail. We handle situations where normal legal channels have been compromised or where traditional law enforcement lacks the resources or authorization to operate effectively. So, you're like a secret agent? Jake managed a slight smile at her question. More like a problem solver. When local, state, and federal agencies can't handle a situation due to corruption, political pressure, or operational limitations, we step in. By late afternoon, they had covered nearly 15 miles of difficult terrain and reached what Jake identified as a temporary rally point, a natural cave system that provided shelter and concealment. Inside the largest cave, Jake had previously cached additional supplies and communications equipment. We'll rest here for a few hours, he said, setting up the radio equipment. I need to contact my team and get an update on the search patterns. While Jake worked with the radio, Maria sat at the cave entrance looking out at the vast wilderness that had become both her refuge and her prison. The beauty of the Montana landscape was stunning, but she could no longer enjoy it knowing that it concealed people who wanted her dead. Jake, she said during a quiet moment, if we make it through this, what happens to me afterward? Do I get to go back to my old life? Jake looked up from the radio equipment and his expression was somber. Honestly, probably not. Even if we manage to testify and bring down this particular operation, these organizations have long memories and extensive networks. You would likely need to enter witness protection and start over with a new identity. The weight of this revelation hit Maria hard. Everything she had worked for, everyone she cared about, would have to be left behind. Her dreams of nursing school, her relationship with her family, her entire sense of identity. All of it would be sacrificed because she had happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm sorry, Jake said quietly. I know this isn't what you signed up for. Neither did you, though, Maria replied. Your mission was supposed to be surveillance, not protecting a witness. True, Jake agreed. But that's how these situations work. Plans change, priorities shift, and you adapt to whatever the mission requires. As evening approached, Jake received word through his radio that the search teams were closing in on their area. The cartel had brought in tracking dogs and thermal imaging equipment, making their cave shelter less secure than Jake had hoped. Quits, need to move again, he said, beginning to pack up the equipment. But this time we're not just running away from them. What do you mean? Jake's expression was grim but determined. My team has identified the location of the cartel's main coordination center for this search operation. It's a hunting lodge about 20 miles north of here. And it's where they're running communications and logistics for all the teams looking for us. Maria felt her blood run cold. You want to attack them? I want to eliminate their ability to coordinate the search, Jake corrected. If we can disrupt their communications and take out their command structure, we can create enough chaos to escape the search perimeter. That sounds incredibly dangerous. It is, Jake agreed. But staying on the run indefinitely is also dangerous, and eventually they'll wear us down or corner us. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. As they prepared to leave, the assault on the hunting lodge began at midnight. Jake had spent 2 hours studying the patrol patterns and identifying the weakest points in their security. The cartel operatives were professional, but they were operating in unfamiliar territory and had grown overconfident in their superior numbers. The generator is in the shed behind the main building, Jake whispered to Maria as they crouched in the tree line. When I give you the signal, you're going to cut the power to the entire compound. That will give us maybe 30 seconds of confusion before their backup systems kick in. Maria's hands trembled as she gripped the wire cutters Jake had given her. The thought of deliberately sabotaging equipment that would put her directly in harm's way went against every survival instinct she possessed. But she understood that this was their only chance to level the playing field. Jake moved like a shadow through the darkness, using techniques he had learned during his military service to neutralize 2 perimeter guards without raising an alarm. Maria watched in amazement and horror as the man she had known as a quiet ranch hand transformed into a lethal operative capable of swift, silent violence. When Jake gave her the signal, Maria crept to the generator shed and cut the main power lines exactly as he had instructed. The compound plunged into darkness, and immediately she could hear shouts and confusion from the main lodge. Jake's plan was working, but Maria knew they had only minutes before the cartel regrouped and began hunting for them systematically. From her position near the generator shed, Maria watched Jake move through the compound with deadly precision. He had explained that his objective was to reach the communications center in the main lodge and destroy their ability to coordinate the search teams throughout the region. If he could accomplish that, the various search teams would lose contact with each other and with their command structure, creating enough chaos for them to escape. The sound of gunfire erupted from the main building, and Maria's heart pounded, with terror for Jake's safety. She had grown to care about him over the past few days, seeing beyond his guarded exterior to the man who had risked everything to protect her. The thought of losing him now when they were so close to escape was unbearable. Suddenly, flashlight beams swept across the area where she was hiding, and Maria realized that some of the cartel operatives had figured out where the power had been cut. She pressed herself against the wall of the generator shed, trying to become invisible as armed men searched the immediate area. "Check behind the building," one of them called out in Spanish, and Maria knew she had only seconds before they would find her. Following Jake's training, she moved quietly away from the shed and toward a cluster of pine trees that offered better concealment. But as she crept through the darkness, her foot caught on a fallen branch, creating a small sound that seemed impossibly loud in the tense silence. The flashlight beam swung toward her position immediately, and Maria heard rapid footsteps approaching her hiding place. Her heart raced as she realized she was about to be discovered, and all of Jake's sacrifice would be for nothing. At that moment, an explosion rocked the main lodge, sending debris and flames shooting into the night sky. Jake had apparently found the communication center and had done more than just disable it. The blast created exactly the distraction Maria needed, as the men searching for her abandoned their hunt and ran toward the burning building. Maria used the confusion to move toward the extraction point Jake had shown her on the map, but as she reached the edge of the compound, she saw Jake emerge from the burning lodge with 3 armed men in pursuit. He was wounded, she could tell from the way he moved, but he was still fighting. Every instinct told her to keep running, to follow his instructions and get to the extraction point. But watching the man who had saved her life being hunted by killers, Maria made a decision that surprised her with its clarity and determination. Instead of running toward safety, she circled back toward the compound, moving carefully through the darkness until she was positioned behind Jake's pursuers. The pistol Jake had trained her to use felt heavy and unfamiliar in her hands, but she remembered his instructions about breathing and stance and the importance of not hesitating when her life was on the line. The first shot she fired went wide, but it was enough to confuse the men chasing Jake and give him the opportunity to take cover behind a fallen log. Her second shot was better, catching one of the pursuers in the shoulder and sending him sprawling. Jake used the distraction to eliminate the other two men with quick, precise shots, then looked around in amazement until he spotted Maria crouched behind a tree stump. "I told you to run," he said when he reached her position, but there was gratitude and admiration in his voice rather than anger. "I couldn't leave you," Maria replied, surprised by her own courage. "We're in this together." They made it to the extraction point just as dawn was breaking over the Montana mountains. Jake's team was waiting with helicopters and medical personnel, and within hours they were in a secure federal facility being debriefed about everything they had witnessed and experienced. Over the next several months, Maria's testimony helped. Federal prosecutors built a case that ultimately dismantled a major drug trafficking network spanning 3 countries. Dozens of arrests were made, including several corrupt law enforcement officials who had been protecting the operation. Jake recovered from his injuries and returned to active duty with his classified agency, though he maintained contact with Maria throughout the legal proceedings. The quiet, guarded man she had met at Blackwater Ranch had revealed himself to be someone capable of extraordinary courage and dedication to protecting innocent people. Maria did eventually enter the Witness Protection Program, receiving a new identity and relocation to a small town in Oregon, where she could safely pursue her dream of becoming a nurse. The experience had changed her fundamentally, giving her a strength and confidence she had never known she possessed. Sometimes, late at night, she would think about that summer at Blackwater Ranch and how a simple job sweeping floors and feeding horses had transformed her from a small-town girl into someone who could face down killers and fight for her own survival. The price had been steep. She had lost her old life and everyone she had known before, but she had gained something valuable in return. She had discovered that when everything was stripped away and she was facing the ultimate test, she was braver and stronger than she had ever imagined possible. And sometimes, in the quiet moments between her nursing classes, she would smile and remember the Special Forces veteran who had pushed her into that deadly trial and helped her find the courage she never knew she had.